welcome all to my presentation. I'm Maarten Laban. I already introduced myself, of course, but it's nice to do it again, I guess. And today I will talk about the research project I've done in the past 5 months. And mine was also on the mud flats, but or in that area. But I researched seagrass, and specifically the seagrass distribution in the Ria de Alvor. And I compared old data sets with my own data that I gathered. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, we don't do.
I'll start with an introduction, and I'll explain why seagrass matters, because it's very important in our to have it in our on our Earth. What is seagrass? Seagrass are basically underwater forests that provide a lot of food to other species, but they also act as nursery grounds, which is of course super important to keep the fish populations high, and it also protects coastlines and our planet as well, because it acts as a carbon sink. Actually, up to 18% of the ocean's carbon is stored in seagrass, which is of course that's quite a lot. And the most common species in the Ria de Alvor is the Zostera nolti. In other estuaries in Portugal, other species also occur, but here it's just one species. And here you can see a close-up of the species. Unfortunately, in Ria de Alvor, it doesn't look like that. It's way smaller. But yeah, this would be the ideal situation. Hopefully, with my research, of course. I can into that a little bit. And why is it important? I already talked a little bit about that. But it disappeared and reappeared over time. It's very influential to, or it's very...
Influenced.
Sorry?
Influenced? No.
Other environmental factors, for example, influence it a lot.
Yeah.
But why does it happening? What's causing these changes? And this research aimed to map and analyze these shifts over time, and to understand what's happening, or to try to understand what's happening. My research approach. You can see a map here with some points, which were the fieldwork days and the fieldwork locations, approximate locations. And what did I do? The first step was to come up with a fieldwork plan, to gather good methods, to write a plan so I knew what to do during fieldwork. And then I came to the estuary. I did some field work. I literally walked past the boundaries of the seagrass to try to map it. And then my second step was to do a historical comparison. So I got old data sets from a master thesis that was conducted in 2010. And from other sources as well, and I put it in GIS, or in ArcGIS, which is a mapping software comparable to Google Maps, for example, but a little bit more advanced and more for research purposes. And then I did GIS mapping, which is this was one of the things I created, but I've also made another map. And what didn't I do? Fortunately, because my research was only 5 months and I had to do it solo, I couldn't assess the environmental factors, such as water quality, sediment, turbidity in the water, and also I couldn't come up with conservation strategies. I wanted to do it beforehand, but it was just a little bit too much to do on my own. And the fieldwork then. Of course, before you do the fieldwork, you have a lot of expectations about it. You want to do it very well, of course, which is nice and all. But the reality sometimes doesn't work out like that, unfortunately. So I've mapped out the do and don'ts. The do's, for example, always check the tides before heading out, because it's not nice if you come to the estuary and you can't go anywhere because it's all underwater. And the second one is wear waterproof waders, of course, or regret it later. I've always wore them, even though it wasn't always super comfortable. It got very sweaty, so you get wet nonetheless. Yeah, and then don't trust the mud always, because sometimes it's deeper than it looks. And I got to experience it. You can see here, Sasha took this picture. It wasn't really pretty. I got stuck for like 1.5 hours, it wasn't great. Fortunately, Marshall came to my rescue. Yeah. And unfortunately, because I didn't want to get stuck again, I skipped over this area, which of course my data, because of it, might be incomplete. I don't know if there's any seagrass there, but in this case, I think safety goes over data collection. And don't assume your GPS will always work. On one occasion I went out and I checked it before, it said it was full, and then I wanted to take some measurements and the batteries just died, and I forgot to bring spare batteries. And some of my key fieldwork observations. Yes, as I mentioned, some areas were very easy to access and others were completely unsafe, which, that can happen. And seasonal timing, this is a very important one as well, because I conducted my fieldwork during autumn, which of course, as everyone knows, the autumn on the northern hemisphere, it's winter, or it's autumn I mean, so the sun is less bright, so the biomass will be less, of course. And it may have affected visibility of the seagrass, and which means it might be more in the summer. And the results, what I discovered. The big picture, I will talk about the big picture, seagrass over time. This is the distribution data. And from 1986 to 2009, the seagrass declined by 92.6%. I don't know if you can really see it, but it's very tiny compared to the year before. And this might have been caused by dredging, pollution, and environmental changes. And then from 2009 to 2019, there was a surprising recovery. It almost recovered to the amount it was before. And it went from 0.19 hectares to 17.27 hectares, which is almost a 90 times increase. And then from 2019 to 2024, there was a very big increase between 2012 and 2019, but then there was another decline with 75.7%. This could have been caused by new, but also by increase of older pressures. For example, as the sir there already mentioned, there was a big dredging project conducted in 2020 or 2019, which could have influenced it a lot. What this means and why it matters. Why is this happening? As I mentioned before, due to environmental changes in the estuary, and estuary is very dynamic, so it's influenced a lot by the ocean, but also by the rivers that feed it. And when disturbance stops, as you all could see, the recovery happens, which is of course that's a really good thing. And the declines align really with human activity and natural variations. For example, as I mentioned, seasonal timing, but also the dredging really impacts seagrass abundancy. But the exact causes need to be studied more. As I said, I'm only one intern, and I can't do this, with just myself. And then the limitations and improvements. Of course, my research was bound to some limitations as well. Surveying in autumn, it causes an incomplete picture, and there were dangerous areas, which means there was gaps in my data. The historical maps also lacked some resolution, so if I zoomed in a lot, I could only see pixels, not really like the boundaries of the polygons, of the shapes of the seagrass. So in the future, it would be nice to, for example, get some original data instead of screenshots, which I use now. And what's next? So For my recommendations for future research is to improve the monitoring, to, for example, do regular surveys, to track changes over time, because this is just a one moment in time. And policy advocacy is also really important, I think, to incorporate seagrass protection in local development plans. As Sasha mentioned, there's not really a management plan right now, but with decrease of pressures, seagrass increases, so it would be nice to incorporate it. And also community engagement could be very important. Work with locals and stakeholders to promote sustainable practices. For example, with the fisheries or the mollusk harvesters. And also to help with restoration projects. And also for future research, it would be good to identify priority areas for seagrass restoration. Sorry, I'm gonna take a little bit forward first. And what could you do to help? Sasha already mentioned a lot, so I hope I can say some new things. So protecting seagrass in daily life, you could do that by avoiding disturbances with, for example, boating or kayaking, not putting your anchor, for example, out in the middle of the estuary. That's already a good practice. To minimize pollution, don't put oil through your drains or paint. That's a good thing. And support sustainable fishing practices, and participate in coastal cleanups with a Rocha, of course. But there are a lot of activities around the world where you could participate in. And to spread awareness. Mouth to mouth is always, it works the best, because you trust, you can say to family members who you trust, or to friends. And why small actions matter. Seagrass helps fight climate change by storing carbon, and it supports fish populations and local fisheries. And lots of small actions make a big difference. And the final thoughts, and also a Q&A if you have any questions. What can we learn from this? Seagrass in Rio de Alvor isn't gone forever, but it needs the right conditions to survive. And more research is needed to understand why it keeps disappearing and reappearing. And protecting seagrass means protecting marine life, local fisheries, and coastal stability. And do you have any questions? Let's talk about this. This was the presentation.
Actually, I hope I'm not going to put you at stake. But maybe you should explain very simply the difference between algae, for instance, and seagrass, because it's not.
Yes, so algae, that's completely different. Okay, so there are four basic life. You have animals, plants, I think algae, fungi, yes. And so seagrass, that's a real flowering plant. So it gets flowers just like any plant or flower does. Whereas algae, that's that's not a plant. Yes.
I think that's enough.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So because it looks similar. Yes, but it's really
very interesting.
it is really
difference
yes.
between what it's a plant.
It's a plant. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Maarten.
Okay.
Sorry.
This is probably a very simple, naive question, but is it possible to seed or plant seed
Yes.
plants?
Yeah,
so
it
you
is.
can take new areas and you can actually plant some more there.
Yes, I totally forgot to talk about that. Yes, but there's been a lot of restoration projects around the world. Also in Portugal, that's used replantation. So they clone it. I think they can grow it in a lab, and then if it's big enough, they can go physically to the area and replant it. But that really only works with in locations where they know for sure that seagrass has already grown in the past, because it's very influential to tidal changes, to stormy weather, for example. So, but yeah, it's definitely because it has seeds like any flowering plant. So it's
So,
Yeah.
following on from that then, are there different varieties
yes,
of seagrass?
Yeah.
Because I was lucky enough to see it in Florida where they had the dugongs actually munching on it, the sea cows, and that was really quite big and
Yes.
quite big flowers, but I'm assuming with the seeds there's lots of different varieties.
yes, that's true. And in Portugal, I think 3 varieties occur, but only in this species. Yes, and in this estuary, only 1 does.
Okay.
Yes, so it's also really important to only introduce the species that
Yeah,
that
that's it.
existed
Yeah.
before. Otherwise, yeah, it could cause some issues as well. More questions?
Are
Yes.
there any particular organisms that are feeding on these seagrasses that you're aware of, like any wildlife, birds, fish?
That's a good question.
crustaceans?
I don't know that
Okay.
answer. Yes, sorry, but I know. Yeah, I know it's used more for nursery grounds for fish. They might use it as food, but I don't know that.
Also,
for sure.
cuttlefish use it
Okay.
to hang the eggs, egg bags, egg sacks, and rays also use it for. And seahorses
Ah, yes,
use it
seahorses. Yes.
as habitats.
Yeah.
We have seahorses in Rio Formosa.
Mhm.
We could have them here if we had a good forest.
Yes, that would be very nice.